sound came before the pain, the thunderous crack of a Winchester rifle splitting the evening air. Cooper Ghost Blackwood froze, deer blood still warm on his hands from the buck he just dressed. Three more shots rang out in rapid succession, followed by something he hadn't heard in years, a woman's scream cutting through the silence of his land. Cooper didn't hesitate. 7 years alone on this ranch had taught him that, in Wyoming Territory, 1875, hesitation meant death. He grabbed his Winchester 73, the same rifle that had earned him his reputation during the war. His eyes narrowed as he tracked movement through the pines, three riders pursuing a lone woman on horseback. Her dress was torn, her golden hair wild in the wind as she desperately tried to outrun her hunters. "Please, somebody help!" Her voice carried across the valley, desperate and fading. Cooper steadied his breath. 80 yards, crosswind from the west. He led the first rider slightly, exhaled halfway, and squeezed. The Winchester's report echoed across the hills as the rider jerked backward, tumbling from his saddle like a broken puppet. The remaining pursuers pulled up hard, scanning the tree line for their unseen attacker. By the time they spotted Cooper moving through the trees like a ghost, it was too late. The second shot caught another rider in the shoulder. The third rider, wiser than his companions, turned and galloped away, abandoning his wounded friend who struggled to control his panicked mount. Cooper approached the woman who'd reined her exhausted horse to a halt. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt and tears, a crimson stain spreading across her shoulder where a bullet had grazed her. Her eyes held equal parts terror and defiance. "Name's Cooper Blackwood. You're on my land now. You're safe." His voice was rough from disuse, like stone scraping stone. "Sarah Calloway," she managed, swaying in her saddle. "They'll kill me if they find me." "Who's they?" Before she could answer, her eyes rolled back and she pitched forward. Cooper caught her before she hit the ground, the scent of gunpowder and fear clinging to her skin. As he lifted her onto his horse, he noticed a leather satchel clutched tightly in her hand, her knuckles white even in unconsciousness, unwilling to surrender whatever it contained. "Guess I'll find out soon enough," Cooper muttered, mounting behind her and heading toward the ranch house that hadn't seen a visitor in 7 years. The firelight danced across Sarah's face as Cooper cleaned the bullet graze on her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, immediately wide with panic until recognition settled in. "Easy now," Cooper said, his rough hands surprisingly gentle with the bandage. "Wound's not deep. You'll live." Sarah winced, pulling herself up against the headboard of the spare bed. "How long was I out?" "Couple hours. Sun's down now." Cooper nodded toward the window where darkness had claimed the mountains. "Time you told me why Harlow's men are hunting you across my property." Sarah stiffened. "How did you—" "Recognize the brand on their horses. Diamond H. Harlow outfit." Cooper's jaw tightened, old memories surfacing like bodies in a flood. "Got history with them." Sarah's hand instinctively went to the satchel beside her. "My husband, Garrett Harlow, his father is Victor." She pulled out papers from the satchel, hands trembling. "I wasn't his wife. I was property. My parents were dying, owed money. They sold me to the Harlows." Her voice hardened. "I found these in Victor's office. Records of weapons sales to hostiles, bribes to judges and marshals, names, dates, amounts." Cooper took the papers, his weathered face revealing nothing as he scanned the contents. But inside, a storm was building, the same storm that had been gathering since that blood-soaked day 7 years ago when he returned from hunting to find his wife Elizabeth and 5-year-old son James slaughtered by Harlow's men. All for this piece of land that stood in the way of Victor Harlow's plans for a private rail spur to the new goldfields. As Cooper shifted to place the papers on the table, Sarah's sharp intake of breath made him turn. She was staring at the framed photograph on the nightstand. Cooper standing tall and proud in his Union Army uniform, Elizabeth seated with young James on her lap. "You had a family," she said softly. "Had." The single word carried the weight of 7 winters alone. Sarah's eyes met his, understanding dawning in them. "Harlow?" Cooper nodded once, saying nothing more. He didn't need to. They both knew what Victor Harlow was capable of. When he unbuttoned her sleeve to finish bandaging the wound, Cooper froze. There on her shoulder, partially hidden by the wound itself, was a small brand, an ornate H scarred into her flesh. The marking Harlow put on all his human merchandise. Sarah saw his expression and pulled the fabric back over the mark. "There are others, dozens. Some sold to brothels, some to mines, some kept as wives like me." Her voice was hollow. "The papers prove it all." Cooper stood, walking to the window to stare into the darkness. His land stretched for miles in every direction, a kingdom of solitude he'd built since the war. Since the murders, the last thing he wanted was to invite trouble onto it. But trouble had already found him, and looking at Sarah Calloway, with her defiant eyes and the brand that matched the descriptions he'd heard whispered in saloons across the territory, Cooper knew the past had finally caught up to him. "Get some rest," he said, checking his Winchester before heading to the door. "They'll be coming for us both now." For the next 3 days, Cooper taught Sarah how to survive. She was a quick study, her hands steady despite her inexperience. He showed her how to load and fire his Colt Peacemaker, how to work the lever action of a Winchester, how to distinguish the sounds of different weapons. "You taught school before all this?" Cooper asked as they practiced at dawn on the 3rd day, Sarah aiming at bottles lined on the fence. "Back east, Boston." She squeezed the trigger, the bottle exploding in a shower of glass. "Taught children to read. Now I'm learning to kill. Life takes strange turns." Cooper adjusted her stance slightly. "Not teaching you to kill, teaching you to live." By the afternoon of that 3rd day, Sarah could hit a moving target from horseback and reload without looking. Her determination burned brighter than her fear, and Cooper recognized something in her that he'd seen in the best soldiers during the war: the will to survive at any cost. That same evening, the messenger Cooper had sent returned with a reply. By nightfall, Marshal Hayes was riding up to the ranch, his lined face a map of all they'd survived together. "Didn't expect to see you again this side of hell, Ghost," Marshall said, dismounting with the stiffness of a man who'd spent 30 years in a saddle. The silver star on his chest caught the sunlight. "Sheriff of Redemption Falls, 20 miles south." "Wouldn't have called if it wasn't important." Cooper led him inside where Sarah waited, the papers spread across the table. Marshall's eyes widened at the sight of a woman in Cooper's home, but the shock was quickly replaced by grim understanding as Sarah explained her story and showed him the documents. "Jesus, Cooper," Marshall whispered after examining the evidence. "This goes beyond Victor and Garrett. There's a federal judge on this payroll, the territorial governor's cousin. This is bigger than you know." "It's exactly as big as I've suspected for 7 years," Cooper replied, cleaning his Colt single-action army with methodical precision. "Just never had the proof before." Marshall ran a hand through his graying hair. "You know I can't officially help you. Victor owns half the badges in the territory, including my deputy. But," he hesitated, "Pinkerton agents are due in 2 weeks. Been building a case against the Harlow operation for months." "We don't have 2 weeks," Sarah interjected. "The weapons shipment to the Blackfoot Renegades is in 4 days. Once those guns reach them, there'll be bloodshed across the territory, and the evidence will be gone." Cooper continued loading his revolver, the metallic click of each bullet sliding home, punctuating the silence. "Then I guess we don't wait for Pinkerton." Marshall shook his head. "Just like Shiloh Creek. You planning on taking on the whole Harlow outfit yourself?" "No," Cooper replied, holstering his weapon. You're going to help me." While Sarah rested inside, the two men walked the perimeter of the ranch, checking sight lines and approaches like they'd done countless times during the war. Neither spoke of the past directly, of the blood-soaked river at Shiloh where Cooper had dragged a wounded marshal to safety under Confederate fire, or of how they'd parted ways after the war, each carrying different wounds that wouldn't heal. "I'm just a small-town sheriff now, Ghost. Not much of a soldier anymore," Marshall said as they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Cooper pointed to a distant bluff. "From there, with a good rifle, you could hit anything moving in that clearing, just like you did at Missionary Ridge." Marshall's eyes narrowed as he assessed the distance. 700 yards, give or take. Wind's tricky through that pass. "You'll manage." As they turned back toward the house, Marshall gripped Cooper's arm. "There's something you need to know about Victor Harlow." His voice dropped. "He wasn't just some businessman during the war. He was Colonel Victor Hampton, 7th Illinois Cavalry." Cooper stared at his old friend, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. "Your colonel? The one who ordered the execution of those civilians at Briggs Crossing, my family among them?" Marshall's eyes were hard as flint. "I've been tracking him for 10 years. Changed his name after the war. Built his empire out here where no one knew his past." Cooper understood now why Marshall had chosen this remote posting, why he'd never spoken about his search. Some hunts were too personal to share. "Guess we both have scores to settle," Cooper said quietly. As they reached the house, a shot rang out from the North Ridge. Cooper shoved Marshall down behind a water trough as dust kicked up from a bullet impact inches away. "Looks like Harlow's men found us," Marshall shouted, drawing his revolver. Cooper rolled to his feet, Winchester already at his shoulder. "Stay down." In the distance, 4 riders approached, rifles raised. Cooper's first shot found its mark, dropping the lead rider from his horse. His second caught another in the leg. Marshall fired twice, forcing the remaining riders to scatter for cover. Inside the house, Sarah grabbed the rifle Cooper had left for her, taking position at the window as instructed. Her hands trembled, but her aim was steady as she fired at a rider trying to flank the men. The shot struck true, taking the man in the shoulder and sending him reeling from his mount. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, 2 of Harlow's men lay dead, 1 wounded, and the 4th had retreated toward town. Cooper approached the wounded man, rifle aimed at his chest. "Tell Garrett his father's secrets are out. Tell him Cooper Blackwood is coming for what's owed." As the wounded man struggled onto his horse and rode away, Marshall turned to Cooper. "You just declared war on the most powerful man in the territory." Cooper watched the retreating figure. "No, I just stopped running from one." That night, Cooper showed Sarah deeper techniques for handling firearms. How to maintain accuracy under pressure, how to clear jams, and how to conserve ammunition. "Thumb the hammer, steady your wrist," he instructed as she aimed at a distant lantern in the growing darkness. "Breathe out as you squeeze, don't pull." The revolver bucked in her hands, the lantern exploding in a shower of glass and fire. Sarah lowered the gun, satisfaction evident in her stance. "You're a natural," Cooper said, an unusual note of approval in his voice. "Most take weeks to develop that kind of accuracy." "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied, reloading the chambers with practiced movements, "and plenty of motivation." Later, by lamplight, they cleaned weapons and prepared for what was coming. Sarah watched as Cooper meticulously disassembled and oiled his Springfield rifle, the movements practiced and precise. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" she asked. Cooper continued his work, not looking up. "Started hunting at 10. By 16, I could hit a running deer at 300 yards. During the war, they put me in a special unit. Sharpshooters." His voice was matter-of-fact, devoid of pride or regret. "Some men are just born with the eye for it. And the stomach for it," Sarah added quietly. Cooper finally looked up, his expression unreadable. Killing isn't something to have a stomach for. It's just something that needs doing sometimes. Before dawn, Cooper led Sarah and Marshall to a hidden cellar beneath the barn, a space unknown even to Elizabeth. Inside were crates of ammunition, weapons from the war, and a small fortune in gold double eagles. My insurance policy, Cooper explained, lifting the heavy lid off a weapons crate. Inside lay precision rifles, revolvers, and even dynamite, the tools of a man who'd been planning revenge for 7 years. Marshall whistled low. You weren't just waiting, were you? You were preparing. Cooper handed each of them additional weapons and ammunition. Tomorrow night, Harlow's weapons shipment moves through Eagle Pass. We hit them there, secure the evidence, and get it to the federal marshal in Cheyenne. 3 against how many? Sarah asked. Not 3, Marshall interjected. I've got men I trust. Not many, but good men. Jim Hawkins, former Army scout. Red Hawk, Sioux tracker, who owes me his life. They'll meet us at Eagle Ridge. Cooper nodded. It still wasn't enough against Harlow's small army, but it would have to do. As they emerged from the cellar, the first light of dawn breaking over the mountains, Cooper noticed Sarah staring at the distant peaks, her expression resolute. You don't have to come tomorrow, he said. You've done enough bringing us the evidence. Sarah turned to him, the rising sun catching the gold in her hair. They took everything from me. My freedom, my dignity. Her hand unconsciously moved to the brand on her shoulder. I've earned my place in this fight. Cooper didn't argue. He recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same one he saw in his own reflection every morning for 7 years. Eagle Pass cut through the mountains like a wound in the earth, its narrow trail barely wide enough for 2 wagons to pass. Perfect for an ambush. As dusk settled, Cooper positioned his small force along the ridgeline. Marshall and Jim Hawkins took the north overlook with long rifles. Sarah and Cooper concealed themselves behind boulders near a bend in the trail. Red Hawk disappeared into the woods to serve as their eyes and ears, his ability to move silently through the forest unmatched. The plan was simple: stop the wagons, secure the weapons and documents, leave no witnesses. Cooper checked his pocket watch. The convoy was due in 20 minutes. He looked over at Sarah, her face set with determination as she checked her revolver one last time. Remember, he said quietly, if anything goes wrong, you ride for Cheyenne with the documents. Nothing else matters. She nodded once, but they both knew she had no intention of running. The first sign of the approaching convoy was Red Hawk's owl call from the forest. 3 minutes later, the sound of wagon wheels and horses reached them. Cooper peered through his scope. 2 wagons, heavily loaded, with 8 riders flanking them. More than expected, but not unmanageable, until he saw the lead rider, Garrett Harlow himself, Victor's son and heir. Sarah's husband. Cooper signaled to Marshall, indicating the change in plans. Marshall acknowledged with a raised hand, adjusting his aim. The convoy entered the pass, moving cautiously. When the lead wagon reached the narrowest point, Cooper fired a single shot into the air. The wagons halted immediately, the guards drawing weapons and scanning the ridges. "Throw down your weapons," Cooper shouted. "You're surrounded." Instead of compliance, the response was immediate gunfire. Cooper ducked as bullets pinged off the rocks around him. Marshall's rifle cracked from the ridge, taking down one of the guards with lethal precision. The battle erupted in earnest. Cooper fired methodically, each shot finding its mark as guards fell one by one. Sarah proved her worth, wounding a man trying to flank their position. Red Hawk emerged from the trees behind the convoy, silently dispatching a guard with his knife before melting back into the shadows. But Garrett Harlow was no fool. Realizing they were outmatched, he ordered the drivers to make a break for it. The wagons lurched forward, picking up speed as they barreled down the pass. Cooper cursed, running for his horse. Keep them pinned down, he shouted to Marshall before galloping after the fleeing wagons. He caught up to the second wagon first, leaping from his horse onto the back of the vehicle in a move that made his war wounds scream in protest. The driver turned, firing wildly with a revolver. Cooper ducked, then surged forward, throwing the man from the wagon. Grabbing the reins, he brought the wagon to a halt just as Sarah arrived on horseback. "The other wagon?" she asked breathlessly. "Garrett's in it. Still moving." Cooper jumped down, opening the wagon's cargo. Inside were crates of rifles, ammunition, and most importantly, a lockbox containing documents, shipping manifests, payment records, everything they needed. A rifle shot echoed from further down the pass, followed by the sound of a wagon crashing. "Marshall," Cooper said with grim satisfaction. They rode ahead to find the first wagon overturned, its contents scattered across the trail. Marshall and Hawkins had the surviving guards covered, but Garrett Harlow was nowhere to be seen. "He took off into the woods," Marshall explained, gesturing toward a game trail that led up the mountain. "Red Hawk's tracking him." Cooper checked his ammunition. "Keep them secure. I'm going after him." "Cooper," Sarah called, her voice stopping him. "He's mine." Cooper looked at her, saw the 7 years of abuse and humiliation etched in every line of her face. He nodded once and watched as she disappeared into the trees, tracking the man who had branded her like cattle. 30 minutes later, 2 shots echoed from deep in the forest. When Sarah returned, her face was spattered with blood. Garrett's gun belt in her hand. Her eyes were cold, her voice steady when she spoke. "He won't hurt anyone else. Ever." She handed Cooper a folded paper from Garrett's pocket. This was on him. A telegram from Victor. They were planning to sell those weapons to both sides, the Blackfoot and the Army. Double the profit, double the bloodshed. Cooper tucked the telegram into his shirt. More evidence against Victor, more nails in the man's coffin. "You did what needed doing," he said simply. Sarah nodded, the weight of what she'd done visible only in the slight tremor of her hands. It felt right, like taking back something he stole from me. The aftermath was bloody but conclusive. 7 of Harlow's men dead, 3 captured along with damning evidence of gun running and corruption. But Cooper knew the real fight was still to come. Victor Harlow wouldn't take the death of his son lying down. They rode through the night to reach the ranch by dawn, Marshall taking the evidence and prisoners to a trusted federal judge in Cheyenne. By noon, Cooper had transformed his property into a fortress. Rifle positions established, escape routes planned, traps set along likely approaches. "Victor will come with everything he has," Cooper told Sarah as they watched the horizon from the porch. "When he learns about Garrett, there'll be no holding back." "Good," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Let him come." They didn't have to wait long. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon that afternoon, at least 15 riders approaching fast. Cooper recognized Victor Harlow at the lead, his white hair visible even at this distance. "Get to your position," Cooper told Sarah, who headed for the barn loft with a Springfield rifle and box of ammunition. Cooper stood alone on his porch, Winchester in hand as the riders approached. They stopped 100 yards out, Victor riding forward alone. "Cooper Blackwood," the old man's voice carried across the yard. "You've taken my son and my property. Come out and face justice." Cooper stepped off the porch, walking slowly into the yard. "Funny hearing about justice from you, Colonel Hampton." Victor visibly flinched at his old name. "That man no longer exists." "Tell that to the families at Briggs Crossing," Cooper replied. "Or to my wife and son." Victor's face twisted with rage. "I gave you a chance, Blackwood. Now we do this the hard way." He raised his arm to signal his men forward. The first shot came from the barn loft, Sarah's rifle barking once, taking down the rider to Victor's right. At the same moment, Marshall's party opened fire from hidden positions around the property. The battle for Diamond Ghost Ranch had begun. Cooper rolled behind a water trough as bullets tore through the air around him. He fired methodically, each shot deliberate, making them count. 3 of Harlow's men fell in the first exchange. The rest scattered, seeking cover where they could find it. From her position in the barn loft, Sarah controlled the eastern approach, her aim steady and true. Marshall and his men kept the western flank secure, catching several of Harlow's gunmen in a deadly crossfire. Victor Harlow, realizing his force was being decimated, retreated behind a stone wall. "Burn them out," he shouted to his remaining men. "Torch the buildings." 2 riders broke from cover, racing toward the barn with torches. Cooper dropped one, but the second made it to the barn wall, tossing his torch onto the roof. Flames quickly caught in the dry wood. "Sarah!" Cooper shouted in warning. She appeared at the loft door, firing down at approaching gunmen as smoke began to fill the space behind her. With no choice, she jumped, landing hard in a hay pile below. A gunman rounded the corner, pistol raised. Sarah fired first, catching him square in the chest. Cooper fought his way toward her, providing covering fire as she dashed for the main house. Behind them, the barn became an inferno, years of stored hay feeding the blaze. Inside the house, they regrouped with Red Hawk, who had slipped through enemy lines. 6 men left, he reported tersely. Victor is trying to circle behind. Cooper nodded grimly. Time for the last resort. He led them to the root cellar where he opened a hidden trap door revealing a tunnel. "Leads to the ridge," he explained. "Mining shaft from before I bought the place. Sarah, you and Red Hawk flank them from the east. I'll handle Victor." Sarah grabbed his arm. "He won't be taken alive. I'm counting on it." As Sarah and Red Hawk disappeared into the tunnel, Cooper collected his final weapons, his father's Colt revolver and a knife he'd carried through the war. Then he emerged from the burning ranch house like a spirit from the flames, moving silently through the smoke toward his final target. He found Victor Harlow exactly where he expected, at the family cemetery where Elizabeth and James were buried. The old man stood before the graves, his back to Cooper. "I knew you'd come here," Victor said without turning. "You're predictable, Ghost. Always were." "And you're a coward," Cooper replied, his voice carrying across the small clearing, "hiding behind hired guns, sending others to do your killing." Victor turned slowly, his revolver hanging at his side. "It was never personal, Blackwood. Just business. Your land was in my way. My family wasn't in your way." Cooper's voice was deadly calm. "They were innocent." "There are no innocents in this world," Victor sneered. "Only survivors and victims. I've survived 2 wars and built an empire. What have you done but wallow in grief?" Cooper's hand hovered near his holster. "I've waited for this day." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Your wife begged, you know, offered herself to save the boy. But orders are orders, right, soldier? Just like Briggs Crossing." Cooper didn't take the bait. "Enough talk. Draw." Victor smiled, a cold reptilian expression. "You first." The moment stretched between them, 2 killers from different worlds, each taking the measure of the other. Then Victor's hand twitched toward his gun. Cooper drew and fired in one fluid motion, his bullet striking Victor's center mass before the older man's gun cleared leather. Victor staggered backward, shock written across his features as his legs gave way. Cooper approached slowly, watching as blood spread across Victor's expensive vest. "My empire," Victor gasped. "You can't destroy what I've built." Cooper knelt beside the dying man, his voice low. "Your empire died with you. Your mines, your land, your power, it's already being dismantled. Marshall made sure of that. The Pinkertons have your records. The governor's been telegraphed. Your friends in high places are scrambling to save themselves." Fury and fear mingled in Victor's fading eyes. "They'll come for you. Men like me always have friends. Let them come." Cooper stood, looking down at the man who had destroyed his family. "I'll be waiting." Victor Harlow, once Colonel Hampton, took his final breath at the foot of the graves of his victims, his blood soaking into the earth that had never truly belonged to him. A week after the battle, Cooper stood on the porch of his half-rebuilt ranch house. The barn was gone, but a new foundation was already laid. Marshall's men had helped clear the debris and start the rebuilding, a debt repaid from long ago. In Cheyenne, the federal prosecutors were building their case against Victor's associates. 3 judges had been removed from the bench. A state senator had fled the territory. The Pinkerton agents had arrived and were unraveling Victor's criminal empire, piece by piece, using the evidence Sarah had provided. "It's good land," Sarah said, joining him on the porch. "Once the new barn is up, you could run twice the cattle you had before." Cooper nodded, looking out over his property. For the first time in 7 years, he saw possibilities instead of memories. "What will you do now?" he asked. Sarah leaned against the railing. "The federal marshal offered me a reward for the evidence. Enough to buy a small place in town, maybe start teaching again." She paused. "Unless there's a reason to stay." Cooper was silent for a long moment. "Land gets lonely," he finally said. "Could use a partner. Business arrangement. You've got a good eye and steady hands." It wasn't a declaration of love. Neither of them was ready for that. But it was an offer of something perhaps more valuable: respect, partnership, a future. "I'll consider it," Sarah replied, but the slight smile at the corner of her mouth suggested she already had her answer. 3 days later, Marshall returned with official papers. The territorial governor had awarded Cooper an additional parcel of land that had belonged to Victor, compensation for what had been taken from him. With it came a letter offering Cooper a position as a federal marshal, should he want it. Cooper folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He wasn't sure about wearing a badge, but he was sure about one thing: the ghosts that had haunted him for 7 years were finally quiet. He could visit the graves of his wife and son without the burning rage that had been his only companion for so long. As the sun set behind the mountains, Cooper and Sarah sat on the porch, cleaning their rifles side by side. No words passed between them. None were needed. They were 2 survivors who had found in each other something neither expected: not redemption, not forgiveness, but the simple, profound understanding that comes from shared wounds and shared victories. The ranch would rise again, different but stronger, like its owner. And if trouble came looking for Cooper Blackwood again, well, this time it would find him ready and no longer alone.